So I wanted to tell you a quick story. I do what I do today because if I didn't, I don't know what else I would do. I have always been involved in church tech. I'm one of those kids who got involved when I was a young teenager. I started hanging around the tech booth, started asking some questions, started to show some interest, and people just started to show me a few bits and pieces. I went and set up the odd microphone and just slowly kind of got into doing church tech. I did an A-level in music technology, and it was at that point that I got my first ever computer, and that was a Windows computer, and I was beginning to mess around with DAWs and audio recording and just odd bits and pieces of tech. And then from there I went on to university and I did a degree in audio engineering, and that was when I got my first Apple Mac computer. And again, I was using DAWs and audio recording, but I also started to look at video and video editing and a few other bits and pieces as well, and starting to develop some of my skills. And for a number of years from that point on, I was using Apple computers. I really got into the whole kind of Apple ecosystem and used a lot of Apple equipment at that point, and was really happy with it, really pleased with what was going on and what was happening. But probably about 10 years ago or so, I got a bit bored with Apple. I felt like they weren't developing the technology as fast as some of the other manufacturers, and so I actually moved away completely from Apple computers. I got myself a Windows laptop and a Windows desktop. I was also running an Android phone and Android tablets. I just went completely off Apple. Anything technical, I was avoiding Apple, going for any other alternative that I could find. But it was that point that I really learned the most valuable thing for me about Apple computers, and that was the reliability and longevity. When I moved away from Apple, I found that equipment was failing a lot more often. I found that things were breaking down. I found that things just generally weren't lasting as long. I was having to do a lot more maintenance on it just to keep computers running and to keep them working as they should be. And so after running those Windows computers and Android phones and things for a number of years, I eventually just got fed up with it and thought, right, that's it, I'm going to go back to Apple. And for the last 5 or 6 years probably, I've been on Apple. And really now I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't use anything else. And I'm always going to recommend, if you are in a position of looking for a new computer for your church or anything like that, I would say look at Apple. I think for multimedia stuff, anything audio-visual, any kind of media, Apple, they just work. It integrates so nicely with so many things. It makes life so much easier. And as I say, me personally, I wouldn't use anything else. But this video isn't about me telling you why you should buy an Apple computer. This video is about me comparing the Apple computers that I have. Over the last few months and years, I have had various different Apple computers. I've used a whole range of different computers for various different things, from audio recording, DAWs, I've done live album recordings, I've done video editing, I've done lighting control, I've done so many different things with my Apple computers over the last few years. And I have been umming and ahhing about what to do. Should I upgrade to the new M1 series of processors? Should I stick with what I've got? And so what I thought I'd do is do a couple of tests between the computers that I do have, and then also share with you some of my thoughts on each of them, and desktops, laptops, the whole lot, everything that I've got here, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, and make a video that hopefully will help you decide what computer you should go for and what things to look out for, and whether or not one of these Apple computers is the right thing for you. So let's head over to the desk and we will take a look at all these different computers, what I've got, what specs they are, and where I'm at with my thinking on them. So these are the Apple Mac computers that I currently use. I have a MacBook Pro, I have a Mac Mini, the M1 Mac Mini, and I have my iMac over there as well. And just to talk you through how I use this space and what I'm doing with all my computers, this desk that I'm at here right now is the one that I use for teaching, for making these videos with. I also do Zoom training courses and things, and all of that is done from here. So I will have products on display and things over here. And there is a Mac Mini that's connected to this screen here that I use for presenting things onto this TV and into a Blackmagic device here as well. So there is a Mac Mini that kind of operates on this desk. Over my shoulder on my iMac, that is where I do most of my day-to-day work. So it's things like emails and websites and Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and that kind of stuff. But one of the big things that I do over there is video editing, and all of these videos that I make get edited on that computer over there at that desk. And so that machine actually is the one that really does most of the heavy lifting, if you like. It's the one that does most of the processing. I'm recording a lot of these videos on my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, the 6K, and I quite often record in B-RAW, although sometimes I'll do it in ProRes. So they're pretty big, hefty files that I'm recording, and I'm editing that all down on DaVinci Resolve on that computer. So it's doing quite a lot of heavy processing over there on that computer. And then finally, my MacBook Pro is the one that I take out when I'm doing gigs and events. So if I'm going out and doing sound or running Pro Presenter or something like that at some kind of an event, I will take my laptop with me to do that generally. Although sometimes the Mac Mini will go out and do that, just depends on how big the event is and whether we've got the time and the space to be setting up a kind of desktop computer. And if that's the case, they'll probably both be going out with me and I'll be running both computers for different jobs. So in terms of spec then, the iMac is actually a fairly old machine. That's a 2015 iMac. It's got an i7 4 gig processor, I think, with something like 32 gigs of RAM. So it's a fairly spec'd out machine, but it is fairly old now, but it runs really well. This is the M1 Mac Mini. It's the base model. I think it's like 8 gigs of the unified memory as they have now. And then this is the 2019 iMac. So it's not the latest iMacs. This is the sort of slightly older generation. This is the i9 2019 version, the one without any connectors on it. We'll come to that in a minute. So those are the specs of the machines that I have, and they all work fairly well. They all do the things that I need them to do fairly well. They have their limitations and they have their pros and their cons, but on the whole, they all work and they all do the job. But this is where I'm at in terms of my thinking. I'll talk you through each of these models and what I think about them and why I've chosen the computers that I've chosen and what I'm thinking about as to whether or not I'm going to upgrade in the future. So first of all, my M1 Mac Mini. Now you may have seen I've actually put a video out already about this, about how to get the third graphics output from one of these. And that straight away highlights what I think is one of the downsides of the M1 Mac Mini computers, is that they only have the ability to be able to plug 2 HDMIs out of this, which can be a limitation. As I say, I do sometimes go out and do, say, running Pro Presenter for an event or something like that. And if you're running something like Pro Presenter, you really need quite a lot of graphics outputs. These days, the very vast majority of what we're doing is being broadcast. You'll have your in-house congregation audience monitors, you'll have stage displays, you'll have a control monitor. Most of the time, you're going to want a minimum of 4 graphics outputs for a lot of what we do. And very often you'll have even more than that coming out of a computer. And it is possible to do that. People will see videos about deck links and how you can set up multiple outputs out of a Mac Mini, which is entirely possible and works really well. And I know a lot of people use that and really like it. So that is one way that you can go to use this if you're going to go down that route with it. So if you're looking for a machine to run Pro Presenter, this can do it, but you need to add extra bits on to do that as well. The other things to watch out for with the M1 series chips. At the point of making this video, there are some things from an audio perspective that are not yet supported on M1. Dante audio is one of the big ones, and I know there are various forums out there about what you can and can't do with Dante. So I would say if you are looking at doing audio, and particularly if you're looking at using Dante as part of your audio network with an M1 computer, then really look into whether your computer will support what you want to do. It can do some things, but it can't do everything. I fully expect that it won't be all that long until Dante have made their solution compatible with M1, and that will happen and that will come through at some point in the future. But as it stands right now, there are some limitations on that, so watch out for that. One of the things that I'm going to come onto in a minute with some of these other computers is fan noise, and this machine actually runs absolutely fine. I have no problems with the fan noise on this. It's very quiet, it's a very silent machine. The other thing I will just mention briefly is connection ports on the back of here. There are some connection ports on the back of here, and you can get most things done with what you've got on here. You have one HDMI port, you have two Thunderbolt USB-C type outputs. There is an Ethernet port on here, which is really nice and really handy. And you've got two USB type 3 outputs on here, the kind of rectangular ones on here. So there are a number of ports on here that you can use, and of course you can put adapters in and have extra stuff on here. So it's fairly reasonable in terms of its output, but if you are going to use it as a graphics computer, be aware there is only one HDMI port on here. If you want the second one, you have to get a Thunderbolt adapter and get your HDMI out on that Thunderbolt adapter. So just be aware of that as well. So let's move on to the MacBook Pro. So as I say, this is the 2019 model. This was the i9 processor before they did the M1 series. That was what they were running for these. And it's a very good laptop. There's a lot of things about this that it's great. It runs fine. It does a lot of stuff very, very well. It will quite happily do video editing. If I'm on the move and I need to do video editing and I can't get back here to do it on this machine, I can do editing on here quite happily, full 6K B-raw footage. It will run on this, no problem. It will stutter a little bit, and it's not 100% smooth in playing back, but I can edit videos on this without too much of an issue. So in terms of processing power, it's a very capable machine, and it will run almost anything else. There's nothing yet that I've tried to do with this that it can't do. Pro Presenter is absolutely fine. Multi-track audio recordings. Another thing I do sometimes is kind of live album recordings. We can be recording 30, 40 channels of audio. It will handle that, no problem. So all of that kind of stuff, absolutely fine. It runs all of that, no problem. The issues, as I've mentioned, very few connectors on this. This was the model that only had USB-C Thunderbolt connectors. It's got 4 of them. It does also have a 3.5mm headphones jack, which is the one thing that is slightly useful on here. But other than that, the connectors on here are rubbish. It was one of the things I really didn't like about Apple when they stepped away from that and started putting Thunderbolt connectors on here. I am so glad they have started putting the connectors back on the laptop. It actually made me laugh when they launched the new laptops and they said, these laptops are our most connected laptops, talking about the number of ports that they have on there. And I actually laughed out loud, because pre this model, they actually had a lot more connectors on than what they're going back to now. But praise the Lord, thank you so much. They are putting connectors back on there again, which is fantastic news. So that is a really big bonus to the new ones. Certainly over this model, the connectors on here are dreadful. You will almost always have to take one of these out with you, and in fact I have done gigs where I've forgotten to take my adapter out with me and had to literally turn around, drive back home and come and get this. Such a small little simple thing, but it's so easy to forget, and if you forget it, you basically can't use the laptop. There is nothing that you can plug into this laptop without one of these. So that is one of the major downsides of this laptop. The other thing that I've mentioned was fan noise on the other one, and again, fan noise on this is pretty loud. I have had issues with the noise of the fan. I actually can't really use it in here if I'm doing filming and things because the fan noise on here is fairly loud, and if I'm trying to record something, the noise of this fan will easily be picked up on mics in this room. So that is a big problem on this. And I've found that both on this one and previous to this, I had a 2014 MacBook Pro as well, and both of them were fairly noisy in terms of fan noise. Again, they did say on the product launch that the new M1 series have all got reduced fan noise. They said they've improved airflow and they can reduce the fan noise and maintain cooling on that. So whether that makes enough of a difference or not, I don't know. But when I'm in a big space, not in a studio, but if I'm in a big church auditorium or something like that, and if we're doing a big live gig and the PA's cranked and there's a big band on stage, then it very quickly drowns this out. You don't have to worry about it in those situations. But in a small studio space, the fan noise on here is enough to be a problem. The other thing that I don't like about the M1, but is great on both the laptop and the iMac, is the monitor. So if you're going to do any kind of video work, particularly video editing, where you want to be really critical in what you can see and what you can edit and manipulate on screen, having a good quality monitor makes a really big difference. I actually have a fairly decent video monitor, but even with that, I find it difficult to edit video, particularly in comparison to both the screen on the laptop and the screen on the iMac. These two monitors are just incredible. They are so good. There is nothing else, no other monitors that I've seen or used that really comes close to this. I think if you want to get a monitor that works as well as these do for video editing, you are going to have to spend hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of pounds on a really high-end monitor to get something that works as well as these do. These monitors in here are just fantastic. So do bear that in mind if you're thinking about getting something for video editing. The computer itself is fairly cheap, but the monitor that you're going to need to add to it is going to cost you a fair bit of money to get close to any of these other computers. And finally then, the iMac over there. What do I think about that one? Well, that has been an absolute powerhouse work machine. It just works. As I say, it's the oldest of all of my computers and it's still running absolutely fine. It can handle the full 6K B-RAW footage. I have done some big video projects with multiple layers of video and it will process all of that no problem. It does stutter a little bit, but it will run through those videos without a great deal of difficulty. So it's a really good workhorse. It has just worked for years. In terms of connections on the back there, it's pretty decent. It's got a reasonable amount of stuff. The one thing that's slightly problematic is it still uses Thunderbolt 2, which is the old type of Thunderbolt connector, which is now becoming increasingly difficult to get hold of. There are fewer and fewer things that actually have that connector on, and to buy a Thunderbolt 2 cable now is really quite expensive. The fan noise on it is pretty reasonable. When it is running particularly hot and the fans do kick in and step up, you can start to just about hear it, but it's still nothing compared to the laptops. It's fine to run it in here. You can just hear it, but it isn't enough to be off-putting or a problem. But otherwise, it's a great computer and it does do the job. So one of the things I wanted to do with all of these computers was to run a test that for me would be kind of like a real world scenario. What is something that I would have to do that would really put these computers through their paces and to run a fairly decent test on them? And for me, that is exporting a big video. And so that's exactly what I did. I had a fairly big video project and I loaded it onto all of these computers, set them all exporting, and just ran this video through just to see how quickly they could render out that video file. And the results were that the M1 computer absolutely wiped the floor with the others. I mean, it took about half the time that the iMac took, and it even beat the i9 as well. So in terms of pure processing power and being able to export a video out like that, this was a fantastic computer for that. As I say, the downside of using it for that is just the ability to be able to connect it to a decent quality monitor to view your videos for editing. But the power that this little computer has really is very impressive. So the final question then is, would I upgrade any of these computers to any of the new M1 series? Will I get the M1 series of laptops or iMac or anything else? And I think the answer to that is probably not quite yet. They are very good computers. As I say, this M1 Mac Mini really does a very good job. It's got a couple of downsides to it, but on the whole, it works pretty well. However, the fact that you can't do Dante audio, or you can't fully do Dante audio yet on there, is one of the downsides for me, and that does hold me back a little bit. And for the time being, these two other computers are doing a pretty reasonable job, so I think I'm going to hold on to these for now. But if you are in a position where you're looking for a new computer and you want to invest in something new, then certainly the M1 series are a very good option, with the only exception of that Dante audio. And just check any other audio products, whether they are still compatible with the M1 stuff. Just check that compatibility generally on most things. But more and more software and things now is becoming compatible with M1, and over time that will just increase, and there will be more and more stuff that will be compatible with M1. So just check whether you can do what you want to do on M1 before you purchase anything. And as long as it's compatible, the machines themselves are great. For video editing, the built-in Apple screens on either an iMac or a laptop are really second to none, and I don't think you can find something as cost effective as buying something like an iMac with a built-in screen in comparison to buying a Mac Mini and then having to add a monitor to that that's equal quality to what you get on an iMac. So again, just think about that if you're doing video editing. So if you are in a position of looking to buy a new computer for your church and you think you need a bit more help, then please get in touch. Either throw a comment down below or get in touch with me through any of my social media channels, or head to my website. So those are my thoughts on my Apple computers, what I have, what I like, what I don't like. And who knows, maybe at some point I will end up upgrading to some of the M1 computers. Hopefully that's been helpful for you. If it has, please like this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel as well. That really helps if you can do that. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks guys.